decided that I was going to make up my mind that I will never be in this situation again. I gave a boyfriend husband privileges.
Oh boy.
Welcome to Girlfriend Let's Talk, the podcast designed for you, a space to have girl chats where we can talk about all things womanhood to Christian life, from what we survive to what we need to succeed. We can share our stories, helping each other through all the highs and the lows. We help, we love. Girl, let's talk with your host, Reva Hart.
I am excited to chat with our guest today. Her name is Dr.Jene Walker. I believe that she's going to lead us into a fascinating conversation. But in her words, Dr.Jene was created to take leaders from one level or dimension of leadership to the next. Jene is the owner of Unleash the Leader Corporation. She is now an entrepreneur, a dynamic speaker, a writer, and a minister. She describes herself as the leaders to leaders. She has found her calling in empowering leaders in business, education, the church, and the household. She is determined to level up her clients' leadership and achieve legendary leader status. Her aim stretches beyond her direct clients. She targets a positive impact on a wider level of society. She is a minister to prison inmates running Bible-led courses. This mentality of service is carried in her latest project. She is now running for the County Board of Education in Georgia's District 1. Ware. Let's get talking. Thank you for being here, Dr. Jene.
Thank you so much for having me, Reva. You're a powerful woman of God yourself, so I'm honored to be here and to have this space with you today.
I started researching and I found out that you minister to prison inmates, men. That pulls at my heartstrings.
Yes. That's one of the most powerful aspects, I think, of my ministry. When God first showed me that I was going to be working with male prisoners, I just really couldn't fathom it, first of all. And I couldn't understand why he was calling me to, especially males, but there was no pushback from me. I welcomed the calling. I heard him clearly. And it was challenging to get somebody like a leader to help me to fulfill that assignment. And I was under leadership at this specific church. And the way they viewed prison ministry was like a stepping stone to something greater. But I knew that God was calling me to transform the lives of men. And so God finally strategically placed me under this minister who was not my church leader, but he was at another church. And I happened to go to his church to take some classes. And he said, I'm the chaplain at McCormick, South Carolina's prison. And I said, God, you are kidding me. And I said, I'm supposed to be doing prison ministry with males. And I just couldn't figure it out. And God has placed me here under you. And he said, oh, I'm the chaplain and I'll take you under my wings. And so I got certified to serve in the prison in McCormick, South Carolina. And when I tell you this man was structured, he taught me all the ropes. He took me through the prison and he relinquished his role and allowed me to be unleashed. There was, of course, this separation between the state and the church that I risked not abiding by, because faith is my pursuit of God. And so I can't separate it from anything I do. As he relinquished and gave me autonomy to teach in the prison, I used Daniel at this particular facility as the foundation of my work. And I was teaching the men how to be elevated in their purpose. And that was powerful, but it was my first experience. And so I had about 66 men in my class. I would say 60 of them were African American men, 6 were other, a couple of white, a couple of Hispanic. And when I tell you they were in this crowded classroom, I had to float as a woman through those aisles and through those chairs and seats and tables, because I believe in proximity as a teacher. And I also didn't want to make them feel any kind of way. So I taught them just like I would teach at church or in school. And it was so powerful. And so then we moved to my hometown, Waycross, Georgia. And of course, I called the chaplain at Ware State Prison and I said, you know, I've been trained in South Carolina. I'd like to get trained and certified in Georgia. I'm ready to hit the ground running. God has given me a new curriculum, and it's called Remade. And it's an acronym, of course. So the R stands for Renew the Mind. The E stands for Evolve into Greater. The M stands for Master Your Gifts. The A stands for Adapt Without Conforming. The D stands for Discover Your Identity. And then E stands for Elevate in Your Purpose. And so I used Joseph's story as the foundational or springboard text for this curriculum. And so God used me at Ware State Prison to unlock these 6 dimensions for the reinvention of a man. And we see that in Joseph's life as he matriculates from being thrown in the pit all the way to the palace and then second in command to Pharaoh. And so just really showing them who they are and what their identity is. We did activities like visualization activities where they had to write the vision that God had given them for their lives. And of course, I modeled that for them by showing them how God had called me to the nation and the nations, and them being able to see that. It just opened their eyes. I think God removed the veils and scales and cataracts off of their eyes through my teaching. And so I would say some of the greatest challenges with prison ministry is not being able to have complete autonomy because there are guidelines that we have to follow. Another one might be limited resources. I can provide to them what people like yourself donate into my organization. And that's how I'm able to buy the resources that they need. But also, they're only allowed like 2 to 3 books. And so God had given me books like Think and Grow Rich for them to study, and How Successful People Think by John Maxwell and things like that. And so them not being able to take all of those books back to their dorms is what we would call them, because sometimes theft would occur or people would be vying for those resources because they're not getting them in other classes at the prison. So organizational issues like that were also some of the challenges. But one thing that God allowed me to be able to do was go through the educational system. And so I've done lots of research on how boys learn. And so now I have this class full of about 35 men at Ware State in Waycross. And instead of me lecturing to them like all of the other facilitators that would come in, God had me to translate the same things that I learned in education as far as research about how boys learn, and to actually transfer that into the prison system. So allowing them to get up and be mobile, which they had not been able to do in some of the other classrooms. I've got them in groups. I have posters all over the room. They're able to take sticky notes and mark the text and write how they had aha moments. And just to see them metamorphose into the kings that God created them to be was one of the most powerful things I've ever experienced. And when I address them as King Duffy and King Demetrius and King whatever their names were. It was just a powerful, powerful thing. So leadership is vast and it's translatable. So you carry that leadership from assignment to assignment. The leader in you never changes. It's at the core of who you are. So that role, it just depends on where you are. You're going to carry that leadership with you. And that is who God called me to be. And he called me to unleash that in other leaders, because I believe that every person was created to lead.
Whose responsibility for the problems men face?
What God has shown me, Reva, over time and experience, especially in the educational system, is that there are hidden systems within systems. There are hidden systems within systems. And so what we see with the naked eye as the educational institution or entity, it is what it is on the surface. So you have a curriculum that is developed by state representation and local representation and even federal representation. And that curriculum, of course, is mandated, and each state has to follow a curriculum. But when you delve a little bit deeper into the curriculum, you may notice things that all students aren't really represented in the curriculum. So there could be gaps as far as our history being omitted completely from textbooks, our history and the way that we learn being completely disregarded in the way that instruction is delivered. And so a lot of those things are strategic. But if the veils and cataracts haven't been removed from your eyes and you have not been awakened to what's happening in those hidden systems, it could be something that you miss. Some of us, especially as a people, will say, oh, I don't think that's what's happening. And so you really have to get revelation about those things. And you begin to look a little bit more closely and you say, why are the majority of African American males placed in special education classes? They can't all be special ed. Why are the majority of African American males being suspended from school with no intervention? And it's like at astronomical levels. Why is it that by the end of third grade, the African American males can't read? This is strategic. And so I believe that there is a demonic strategy that's always operating, which is another system that's hidden. And so you have the hidden societal system, and you also have a hidden demonic system. And so you see that in education, you see that in the economy. Let's go all the way back to slavery and how when slavery was abolished, that there was a 13th Amendment, and that amendment said that slavery was abolished except in the event that a crime had been committed. And so that is a caveat that most of us never even noticed was there. And so we said that slavery was abolished, but then we changed the laws so that laundering now is against the law. And you have African American males who are standing around laundering because nobody white will hire them. And so now we're able to arrest them and put them into this new system, which is the new slavery, which is called the prison system. And so now we have this pipeline to prison. And so if we really think about it, of course, all of us, we have our own minds, we make our own decisions. And those men did some things that landed them into this now prison system. But if we dig a little bit deeper and look at all of the things that a lot of our boys have gone through from the very beginning, through the educational system, in the homes, now we're dealing with spirits of rejection. Those are hidden things that we can't see on the surface. We're dealing with spirits of oppression because the slavery mentality was passed down from generation to generation, and it's pervasive in families that don't know about spiritual warfare and how to break out of those things and how to overcome oppression. And now we have males who deal with the spirit of abandonment because they never had fathers in the home, or their parents were right there in the home, but they still abandoned them because they don't have the time nor the energy to focus on taking care of them because they too are oppressed. And then you also have perversion, which is rooted in insecurity. My spiritual father, Apostle Jonathan Ferguson, was teaching in his class with his wife, my spiritual mom, prophetess Amanda Ferguson, and I think it's called The One Forever. They were talking about how perversion is rooted in insecurity. When you deal with homosexuality and you deal with molestation and you deal with rape and all of those things, it's really rooted in the fact that you don't know who you are. And so now you allow these spirits of perversion to come in and they cause you to commit these crimes. You deal with low self-esteem and all of these things, and those things are hidden. And if you don't have the spiritual eye, then you don't know how to address those things. And if you haven't been equipped and you don't know that there's something called the blood of Jesus that can wash away all of these things, then how do you deal with those things? So whose responsibility is it? It's my responsibility.
Yes.
That's what he created me for, to reveal those things, to expose those things, and to help reveal and rebuild and reinvent these men into the kings that they were originally created to be.
Can we start at the beginning? Let's talk about the little Jene. I read that people notice leadership traits in you from a young age.
Well, I want to tell you a brief story where I struggled with my identity when I resigned from the Board of Education in Augusta, Georgia. I went through this period of really feeling lost, like I didn't know who I am, because I had attached my identity to a position and a status in a school system. And so when I didn't have that anymore, I struggled with who am I now? And I was a leader in the educational system, but who am I now? And as I grapple with that, I may have been on my chair of affliction. And my mom came to visit me And she brought over this old brown looking piece of paper. And I'm like, Mama, what is this? And she said, I want you to look at it. And so when I looked at it, I noticed that it was like a pre-K or kindergarten inventory that my teacher had done on me. And so the first thing I did, of course, was look all the way down at the indicators to make sure I got a yes on every one of them. You know how we are, Reva. When we're leaders, we want to make sure, did I get it right, you know? And so I looked and I noticed that I had all yeses, so I'm good, right? But then I began to look more closely at it. And one question said, does Jene, now I was 4.5 years old at the time of this inventory. And the question said, does Jene get along well with others? And my teacher wrote, yes, as long as they do what she tells them to do. But it said, is she well liked by her peers? And it said, her peers love her. So I thought that was ironic that I'm bossy and I tell them what to do, but they still like me. And then another comment that she made was that Jene loves to be the leader. And when I read that, I burst into tears. And it took me back to the scripture that says that God knew the prophet before he was formed in his mother's womb, that he foreknew me, right? Before I was ever formed, he knew who he created me to be. And that to me solidifies the idea that everybody has a purpose. And in this scripture, this particular prophet's purpose was to be a prophet, right, to Israel. Thing that gets me about little Jene is that little Jene knew at age 4.5 that she was created to be a leader. And so I would say that one of the leadership attributes that I got from my father was a self-awareness mindset. He began to teach me and instill in me to pay attention to how other people receive me as a leader. Do people see me as bold? Do they see me as assertive? Do they see me as or hear me articulate who I am? And he taught me to always look a man, especially white, because my dad was the first black foreman at the railroad at the CSX. And so he had to lead other men who were white that didn't believe that he should have had that position. Of course, from his experiences, he's teaching me. And so he said, Jene, when we go to this dinner with all of these people, I want you to look them square in the eye and give them a firm handshake. And so always be aware of how people perceive you. You don't hold your head down. Hold your head up. And when you study our people, we traditionally look down because that spirit of oppression. And it's difficult for us to look a person in the eye. Culturally, in different cultures, some women are taught that in order to honor authority, that you're not supposed to look them in the eye. But I was taught something totally different, which is to look a person in the eye. So that self-awareness mindset is something I think my father instilled in me. But I love the balance between my mom and my dad because my mom taught me a servant mindset. And so at the same time that I'm bold, I'm also a servant. I'm concerned about what other people need. And so that's why you see me serving in ministry in the prison. What do those men need right now at this stage in their life? How can I serve them? How can I share my power with others? Even though I dominate in my industry, I want to make sure that I share my power. And so as I unleash leaders, I also show them how to dominate. So King, I want you to stand up and I want you to present. Do you know that some of them have been in that prison for 20 years? And do you know they went through an entire educational system where they never had an opportunity to stand in front of an audience and show the King on the inside of them? So for me to say, okay, King, you're going to have to present your visualization. You got to stand and you got to speak. And for me to empower them to do so, believe it or not, that's a servant mindset. So using my power to influence others. I want to share another story with you. When I was a little girl, I invited the students when we were walking home from elementary school over to my house. And so if it were 10 of them walking home in the group, I said, y'all come over to my house. And I took my mom's because she had pink hot dogs in her freezer, those pink ones that's mixed up with any and everything. And she had beef hot dogs in her freezer. And I took the beef hot dogs because they taste the best. and I boiled those hot dogs and I fed I was passing out hot dogs. And when I tell you my mom tore my tail up when she got home, but that's another tenet of my ministry, which is called Salt and Light Evangelistic Association Incorporated, by the way. And through that nonprofit, we teach Jesus about helping those in need. We give to the homeless. Yes. And so I could see that servant mindset in me as a little girl because that's who my mom was. And that's what she instilled in me. So that's a little bit about the little Jene.
I just can visualize you being loved by everybody.
Because I wasn't the cutest little girl now. And so when I would come home and cry to me, oh, honey, if you saw pictures, you'd say, oh my God. Come home and I'd cry to my dad and I'd say, Daddy, they're picking on me and they're calling me names and they're saying I'm ugly. And he said, let me tell you the story of the ugly duckling. Wait a minute, Daddy. Wait a minute. Are you saying that I might be ugly right now? He said, you may be ugly right now, but when I tell you, baby, I can see it in your features that you are going to blossom into the swan. Listen, as cute as that story is, that does nothing for the little girl that has to go through this phase of being considered unattractive to get to the swan phase in my life. And so I dealt with the spirit of rejection. And that bold little leader did begin to be a little more passive. I literally had a spirit of two. That's what I call it. That's what God revealed to me that it was. And he used this guy to tell me, ever since I've known you, you've always had two. And I said, two what? And he said, two guys. And then what God showed me was that I also allowed the guy to have two. And so I would always play second fiddle to somebody else. And that's what the spirit of rejection did for me. So I wasn't always this bold leader. I went through this phase. It's like when you're little, you have so much energy and you have so much belief in the world and you have so much belief in yourself and belief in other people until you don't anymore. Because life happens and it happens to us at different stages. Some women leaders have gone through molestation. They've gone through incest. They've gone through rape. They've been passed along from foster care to foster care. And those situations will literally mess with your mind. They will steal your identity. And you have this mindset of, I can't do this, or I'm not enough, or I'm ugly, or who will want me now, or I'm used up, or I'm used goods. And so that is where God has strategically placed me in this season to help women with these limiting beliefs and these mindsets, because I know what it's like to deal with the spirit of rejection and having the leadership identity stripped away from me and operating in less than who God created me to be.
Thank you for sharing your story with us. Who were some of the favorite leaders of your childhood?
Not to be cliche, but believe it or not, church leaders were probably some of my favorite. I had this Sunday school teacher who made us memorize the books of the Bible, and she didn't play. She had a switch in Sunday school. She saw the leader in me, and it did help that my dad was like very charismatic, a ladies' man, very handsome. And he came to the church and literally went to the women and said, make sure you use my daughter in a leadership capacity. I'm not kidding you, Reva. It's the funniest thing. He went to the ladies and he put in a plug for his girl. So Miss Junior,
she answered the plug.
They answered it. Oh, of course we will, JW. So she would call on me a lot and she recognized the leader in me. My pastor, I gotta tell you this funny story. He came over to visit my mom, and it was probably about my dad, the womanizer. And he came over to visit my mom, and when he came in, his name was Reverend E.J. Jr. Reva, the servant in me, my mom taught me all these things. I went and I got a glass and I got a paper towel, and she taught me how to fold the paper towel. And so I took this glass, I folded the paper towel, and I wrapped it around the glass. But then I went in the den and I got a drink out and I poured the drink in the glass. And then I went back to the refrigerator and I poured some milk in the glass too. And then I passed the drink to the pastor, and as I was passing it to him, I looked at my mom and she wasn't saying anything, but she was going. So for your listeners, she was motioning, no, don't do that. But she didn't say it. She was like, no, don't give him that. Don't give him that. And I'm like, what? What's wrong? Well, what I didn't say was the first place I went to get the drink was to the bar because we had a bar in the den, and I got some Smirnoff vodka in the glass, and I mixed it with the milk because my dad drank Smirnoff vodka and milk, and I was allowed to be the hostess. And when we have company, which was quite often, I would serve them peanuts because they had coquino. That was a game, but we don't play that anymore. But we would have tables all around the yard on the patio, and I would set up those tables for coquino, and I would serve the peanuts and the beverages. And I gave that to the church leader because I loved him so much. I looked up to him so much. I wanted to serve him. Is that the funniest thing you ever had? He was so tickled, and I didn't know because I was like 5 or 6.
So you started out as an English teacher, and which leadership principles did you gain from being in front of the classroom?
I want to say a spirit of excellence, and that is something that I really try to instill in the leaders in my sphere of influence because of all of the things that we've been through. Sometimes it's so easy to be laxed.
Yeah.
It's so easy to come to the forefront, not bringing our A game. So one of the main principles that God, I think, breathed into me himself is the spirit of excellence. I believe that you should model what you want to see. So in everything that I create, you know, I'm using Canva, I'm hiring designers to help me to, you know, just exude the excellence of God. And Daniel in chapter 5, verses 11 through 12, to me, is like one of the best biblical models that we have for having this spirit of excellence. That scripture says that he had an excellent spirit. He had knowledge and understanding, interpreting of dreams, and solving difficult problems. And it was those things that catapulted him into the very presence of the king. And so a lot of us haven't been elevated and promoted in our leadership because we aren't bringing our A game. And so sometimes you have to just go ahead and position yourself for greatness and for excellence, no matter what it is that you're going through in your life. You've always got to bring your A game. So having a spirit of excellence, honing your knowledge. Like it's not enough for me to say I got my doctorate degree in leadership, in curriculum and instruction. I have to continue to read books like Think and Grow Rich, like Wealth Zones by Apostle Jonathan Ferguson, like Apostles 101 by Apostle Jonathan Ferguson. If wealth is my mandate and my mantle, then I'm reading books like The Millionaire Moses or The Millionaire of Lazarus or The Millionaire from Genesis or The Automatic Millionaire or Becoming a Millionaire God's Way. We can't have a mediocre leadership lifestyle. We have to always hone our knowledge that I've learned from being in the front of the class.
You spoke a lot about learning, and that is an important attribute to have. To be a leader is to learn, constantly in a state of learning. Which ability is more important than the other? The ability to teach as a leader or to learn as a leader?
I think that they are equally important, Reva. I think it's just as important for us to teach if we're called to lead as it is for us to learn. But what I've noticed in my own life is that teaching and learning is oftentimes seasonal. If you look at Daniel's life again, Daniel and his 3 boys, their names were changed actually from their Hebrew names to this Babylonian culture names or whatever. So they went through this season of training and learning. And during this season, they read all of these books and all of these different disciplines and subjects. And they were studying and studying and studying to show themselves approved. And what God did was he breathed on them and he gave Daniel and his friends wisdom beyond that of any other magicians or any other of the men who were in training with them during this season. So as they positioned themselves to learn and to be trained, then came a season of elevation. And so it was during this season of elevation that Daniel became the counsel to the king. So I noticed that a lot of times that your training, extensive training, is for a season. But for me personally, I believe that I'm a perpetual student. And so there is never like a season in my life where I'm not teaching and learning at the same time. I will always be a student of the word. You will never see me say, I know this Bible through and through, that I don't want to learn anymore. I will always be a follower of my spiritual parents, Apostle Ferguson and Prophetess Ferguson. I will always be a follower as far as a student of the Word of God.
You mentioned earlier that you resigned from a high-paying job, and very soon after, you went through a relational change. How did you prosper from that pain?
I have learned with all of the things that I've been through in my life that trauma is relative. And so during this particular season in my life, when I lost the man of my dreams at that time of 6 years, he was a father figure. He was my best friend that was protective of me. We spent a lot of time together. We merged our families. So we had cookouts together. Again, I was a leader at the time in a high school. So we had this mentor program, and I had these mentees who were my students. So I would literally bring them to my home. They had never been out of their neighborhood.
Oh, wow.
They had never seen a neighborhood or community, which was a golf community and a gated community where I lived in the Augusta area. They'd never seen that. So when they came to my house, they literally thought it was a mansion, and it's really modest, but to them, it was a mansion, and I wanted them to see this side of things, and he was my partner in that. So he'd pull up the grill, heat it up, and we'd cook for them. You know, my mom would come to town, throw in a pot of spaghetti, and we'd make a weekend out of it. And so he was an integral part of my life and my son's life, and I with his children. So it was very traumatic for me, because that's what trauma was for me in that season of my life. And so after going through this mourning, the loss of my man, I literally had to make up my mind that I wasn't going to make the loss of this man an idol in my life, and that God is a jealous God. And that I had given him so much power, and God didn't like it. He wasn't my husband, and I gave him husband privileges. I gave a boyfriend husband privileges. And so God had to humble me, and he had to refocus me to make him the priority in my life. And he began to show me that my mindset was of one that lacked self-worth. I didn't believe I was worthy of marriage. I didn't believe that I was worthy to be a wife.
Yeah.
And I had made myself a perpetual girlfriend. And so once God began to reveal to me my loss of identity, I decided that I was going to make up my mind that I will never be in this situation again. I will never give a man who's not my husband the privilege of everything that I am, because I was created to be a suitable helpmate, a sustainer beside a man. And any man that connects to me is going to be upgraded. Every area of their life is going to be upgraded. And God has used me in all of these relationships to take those men from one level in their lives to the next. And if I reflect back and I look at all of them, college degrees that God helped me to help them get, passing certification tests that God used me to help them get, enhancing their spiritual lives. They began to fast. They began to pray. They began to read the word because of who I am. Never again will I give that kind of intimate insight into me to a man that is not my husband unless it's in a training capacity. So I had to shift with the shift. It was a shift that I didn't ask for. It was a shift that I didn't want. I really believed that God could make this man into my husband. And so when he shifted out of my life, I had to then shift with the shift and take ownership in my parts, right?
Right.
And so that helped me to birth, going through all of these things helped me to birth this leadership business that focuses on mindset hacks for other women leaders. And so it's the foundation of my program that I'm about to launch around August called Taking It All Back. So everything I lost in that season with him, God had to teach me how to take it all back. If I lost my identity, I got my identity back. If I lost my self-worth, I got it back. And then with that, how can I now dominate as a leader? Taking it all back. And it's an 8-week program. And the whole premise of it is to teach women leaders in their mindset how to dominate. And that is the first tier in my business, Unleash the Leader Corporation. It's ready to transform your mindset. And it's for women who've been through things like me. They have so much power and so much purpose, but it needs to be unleashed. And we've got to go in now and shift all of these paradigms, which are really spiritual strongholds in the mind that are keeping them in bondage on purpose so that they can't operate in their purpose.
You mentioned first tiers. Do you have multiple tiers of your program?
There are 3 tiers in my overall business. And in my overall business, when God told Abram, I will make your name great, there were certain qualities and characteristics that I believe a leader needs to advance to the status of legendary. And there are 5 mindsets that I want to leave with every woman leader that's listening. And the first mindset is self-awareness. That is, in my organization, we believe that you should have 10 mindsets, but I just want to share 5 today as they relate to my program, Taking It All Back. A self-awareness is a thinking skill that allows you to judge how others see you, not that you're paranoid about what they think about you, not that you're going to be in people bondage, but you always want to pay attention to how people perceive you. Because if those are the people that you're called to lead, you want to have access to be able to do what it is God called you to do. And if there's this barrier that's keeping you from imparting into them, you want to always pay attention to how they perceive you so you can make those adjustments, because your main goal is to serve those people. The second mindset is a visionary mindset. You've got to have a visionary mindset. You've got to be able to see the vision that God has for you from a bold and courageous perspective. You got to be unafraid to fail. What if I do it and I fail? You've got to be unafraid to fail. When you're a legend, oh man, I messed up. Okay, that didn't go well. Let me come back to the table and do that thing again. But when you have a mental barrier, you will allow that thing to inhibit you and keep you from dominating in your purpose. So you've got to be unafraid to fail or make mistakes. You've got to be unintimidated by that great purpose that God has shown you. The next one is you've got to have a purpose-driven mindset. And when you have a purpose-driven mindset, you're inclined to distinguish your path from your purpose. Because what will happen, Reva, is if we get it twisted about the path, right? I would have stopped a long time ago and still be in the educational system. Right? I would have stayed right there, but that was just something that God had me doing along the path. That's not the ultimate purpose. So when you're purpose driven, you can see beyond where you are right now and realize that what you're doing right now is just a part of the trajectory and continuum that God has you on to this greater purpose that he has for you. Growth is a mindset that allows you to think of challenges as adventures. When you have a growth mindset, you don't allow those challenges to shut you down. And that is one I struggled with a long time. I saw every setback, every obstacle, every challenge, every roadblock that the enemy put in my path.
it's not meant for me to do it. Oh, it just must not be meant to be, right? But when you have a growth mindset, you say, bring it.
Mm-hmm.
Bring it. What you got for me today? Because I'm an overcomer. And this challenge right here is an adventure for me, because now I'm going to call in my girls. We're going to pray about this thing, right? We're going to come against this thing, and we will overcome this thing. You have a spiritual tenacity when you have a growth mindset that allows you to see challenges as opportunities. Finally, the fifth mindset that I want to share is you have to have a wealth mindset. As a people, we don't have it. Not specifics, but as a people, we don't have it. We believe that poverty is our lot. You have the ability to change your financial state. When you have a wealth mindset, you believe, you know, and you understand that you have the ability to change your financial state. You can receive the blessing from God that adds no sorrow and makes you rich, or you can decide that you were the person that Jesus was talking about when he said, the poor will be with me always, right? It could be that my mom and dad taught me that you're supposed to save, but you hoard that money and you don't do anything with it because in case of an emergency. It's different from person to person. You know, somebody else's struggle or mental bondage, the origin may be that they are promiscuous, right? That they're a number 2 girl because there's a spirit of adultery. Yeah. And that thing has been holding them back from purpose because they're always with somebody else's man. And their mental bondage, they're thinking that this is all I'm worthy of and this is all I deserve. And it's kept them back from purpose. So you really got to dig down and determine the origin of your mental bondage, because that is the beginning of your freedom to be able to take back everything that God has for you in this season. You also have to determine the source of the strongholds in your mind, because those strongholds are shaping every decision that you make. If you can hold on to that, then you can break the generational poverty off of your family. And then finally, identify avoidance behaviors. The thing that's keeping me from starting the podcast. Why do I continue to avoid it? The thing that's keeping me from launching, taking it all back. Why do I continue to avoid it? You got to identify those avoidance behavior that you're probably using as a safety net because you're in fear about dominating. You're in fear about your name being made great. You're in fear about taking the nations. You're in fear about becoming the millionaire that God has created you to be. So when you identify and expose that demon, then you can begin to dominate in your thinking. And that's just one lesson.
How long is the program again, Dr. Jene?
It's an 8-week program.
8-week program. You said that's just one lesson.
That's one lesson. Yes.
We've touched on so much. You touched on your beginning of your childhood to your program. And I wanted to ask you to share with us, how is your experience going with running for a county board of education in Georgia District 1?
It's going, Reva, and it's just now. The victory is this: whether I win or not, I won. But I'm claiming victory in this position. So I said all that to say that I will do my part in campaigning, but I've also availed myself and surrendered myself to the will of God in this race. Because as soon as it's time to campaign, this coronavirus hit, and now I can't go out and I can't go to people's homes and I can't interact with people the way that I need to. And so God is so amazing to me. So now I have no choice but to surrender it to him. And the outcome is in his hands. And I will do what he says, like he told me to go live. He told me to begin to address some of the concerns and questions of my constituents. And so he gave me this idea of this TV show. And so now I'm going to do conversations with Dr.Jene Walker, who can get to know who I am in my city so that they can send me their questions and their concerns.
and I can address those now and campaign virtually. It's going to premiere on May 4th on my public figure page, Jene Walker for District 1, where I'll be premiering my show.
I knew it was going to be a fascinating conversation with you. This is a fascinating conversation. Do you have any lasting thoughts that you want to leave?
So right now, for an overview, they can go to my website, www.JeneWalker.com, to just get a big picture of who I am at Dr.Jene Walker. Please join my group, Unleash the Leader. Also, my new book is a journal that's been released, How to Live the Golden Life Journal. The journal is amazing and the response has been amazing. This is my second book, but this is my first time publishing through Amazon as a self-publisher, where I'm able to look at the reports to see how many books are purchased each day. So they can buy that journal and go to my website, www.JeneWalker.com. Follow me on my public figure page. Join my group, Unleash the Leader.
And you can have a strategy call with the leaders coach, Jene Walker. So all you have to do is request the link. I'll send it to you and we can go from there.
We really hope you enjoyed this episode of Girlfriend Let's Talk, powered by My Story, the magazine. Stay connected with us directly through our website, www.mystorythemagazine.com. You can also join the discussion on Instagram and Facebook at MyStoryTheMagazine. If you would like to share your story or like to speak with us, please send us an email through hello@mystorythemagazine.com. And as always, thank you for having Girl Chat with us. Until next time, girl, go be great.